Martine. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
G'day, Grant. I'm great, actually. Thank you so much. On a beautiful Margaret River sunny day.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Lovely in the Margaret River. Haven't been there for a couple of years, but I've always enjoyed my time there. It's a beautiful part of the world. I'm a bit jealous. I'm here in suburban Sydney, which is nowhere near as picturesque or interesting.
It is truly beautiful. This morning I just went to the beach actually for a walk, and it was just stunning autumn light, and it was a bit nippy, like cold, but there
Beautiful.
was not many people, and I was walking towards Surfers Point. That's actually, you can
Yep.
see it sometimes on the World Surf Leagues. Yeah, truly, I'm thinking, wow, I'm here actually. It's beautiful. But we live near town, so it means usually I do my walks in the forest when I do the
Yep.
walk, and that's also equally very beautiful, and I love it too. So of choices.
Fantastic. Now, I know you've got a very varied portfolio, but I want to focus a little bit on the landscape stuff more than
Yes.
anything, and in particular the aerial work that you're doing in Western Australia and other places. But I'm just keen to talk a little bit about some of that. Why don't we start with how you got into photography in general and how you then got into that aerial side of things with the landscapes of Western Australia?
Yes, actually, it's interesting what you're saying, because the portfolio is indeed diverse and varied, and I don't consider myself a landscape photographer, but landscape photography is part also of my story, but I'll tell about it a bit later. But I was born in Paris and I was raised in Bordeaux, and at the age of 19, I went traveling the world for quite a number of years. And eventually, when I was about 27, I landed in Sydney, and this is where I went through the migration process. So photography came quite late in my life. It was not like when I can only remember one thing though. When I was 12, I used to do the dark room processing and everything when I was young, which I really loved. But then after that, I really didn't really delve into it until much, much later. So when I was in Sydney, Grant, and I started doing, I had that interest, and I had a camera, which actually I broke by mistake after, I don't know, the circumstances, but anyway, it got broken. So I bought a whole new set of camera. And then I decided I really should now take it a bit more seriously. I was about 27, 28 actually at that point. Sorry, somebody just left the door. That's husband. So I started the photography when I was in Sydney, and I did quite a few courses, not many actually. I did a few courses, but what I felt at that point, because I decided I'd love to work with professionals directly and just actually be side by side. And actually, I was really lucky. I went to have an interview with the Australian Financial Review, and I ended up doing pretty much a year of freelance work, but also more, how do you call that, like traineeship in some ways. So I was pretty much working alongside some of the photographers, and then bit by bit, as it happens, someone gets sick, someone is away. So I was working at the desk, but occasionally I would replace a photographer. So it's over the years, because I stayed quite a few years there, I ended up also shooting. But initially, it's always this long-term investment. You always think, but actually, I knew that it would be actually, it was quite funny. When I started photography, I said, in 3 years, I'll be all good and everything. Of course, it's a lifelong journey. So when I look back, I was like, wishful thinking. But that was really, and those Sydney years, they were great. I was living in Manly, Queenscliff area. Initially lived in Neutral Bay, but eventually Queenscliff, Manly, I would take the what you call it,
the ferry.
ferry to go to town. I would walk to work. It was just brilliant. It was my beautiful Sydney years. And I was working on the side, doing just what you do actually as a freelance photographer in Sydney. I was still teaching a little bit of French at night also. I was juggling a lot of that too in the early days. And I suppose, when you migrate to a new country, there's so much going on. You try to understand. My English was not understood about the Australian society, but actually now that I look back, I'm like, man, you understood nothing actually. Sorry?
I said, we're a weird mob.
Oh, interesting. But it was just establishing myself, basically starting from scratch and learning so much. And so these were my early years in Sydney. And in 2002, I decided do you remember Robert McFarlane? He passed away, but I followed one of his masterclass actually with, I think it was Grenville Turner.
Okay,
I had done a masterclass with them, and I remember Robert challenging us to have a project, and I froze a little bit. I was not sure, but I had read about East Timor, and I said, I'd love to go to East Timor. And he looked at me and said, why don't you? I said, Yeah, I don't know actually. Why don't I? So straight after our meeting, I rang Qantas and I booked my flight to witness the independence of the country. So that was
Fantastic.
it was in May actually, 2002. So I flew there, came back to Australia after the witnessing of the independence, stayed for about a year in Sydney, and then I decided. I don't know. I just decided actually the world is mine in some ways. I can go anywhere really.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I took my two suitcases and went back to East Timor to live for a year and a half.
Wow.
And yeah, and I just worked as a freelance photographer there. And it was really funny. Every month I was running to the customs to get my immigration, my stamp to
Yep.
stay. And I say, oh, I'm a tourist. And so it was pretty funny for a year and a half. And subsequent to that, I applied for a job with the UN. It was not exactly a job, but you apply for a pool of
Mm.
photographers and jobs, basically. And I landed myself my first job in the UN for which I stayed then for 10 years. That was in Burundi, in Africa.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I went, that was my first UN mission.
Mm.
And Grant, what was really funny, that was 2003 or four, and that's when we started transitioning from film photography to digital. And I
Yeah.
remember frantically picking up the phone, call a friend who was a journalist. He was about to come and visit me in East Timor, and I said, please bag me. At the time, it was a Canon 10D. Can you bring,
Okay.
that was my first digital camera. And I said, please, because I'm going to Burundi. I have no idea what the conditions will be. And yeah, so I did that transition. So I stayed for, I know we won't talk about the UN, but I stayed for about 10 years. But the reason why I wanted to mention that was during all of those 10 years, because in the UN you fly a lot by helicopter to
Yeah.
places which are either remote or dangerous or there's just
Sure.
no road. So I really developed a lot that bird's eye view. And I remember I would enter the UN helicopter. It's a big M, it's a Russian helicopter,
Yep.
that massive one, and we'd be about 20. And I would always sit at the back and I could that was the only window you could open. I could, but the problem is that obviously I couldn't tell the pilot turn left and right.
Yeah.
And I didn't have really much option about where they would fly or when. So I suppose that's why the first thing that I did when I came to Margaret River 10 years later was to actually choose my when I would fly, where,
Yeah.
and all of these things. But at the time, it was a lot of fun anyway. That part, I'd say.
Amazing. And I guess what is it about that aerial view that has really captured your heart?
I don't know. I was always mesmerized, Grant. Like some of the best flight that I've done at the time, it would be like, say, flying about the massive Congo forest, for example.
Yeah.
It's one of the second, I think, largest forest in the world. And when you get lost in your thoughts, looking at the earth from above is something really grand and majestic. Flying above the Western Sahara Desert, for example. Actually, I had a funny moment once. We were flying and there was absolutely nothing for miles before, miles after. And I remember we flew and I saw this man walking on his own. And I thought, where is he coming from and where is he heading? Because there was absolutely nothing. And I was, to this day, I always wondered about that man walking. And obviously, I'm sure he knew what he was doing. But
Well, you
so,
hope so.
yeah, you hope so. There was this thing, or for example, flying above the tea plantations in Burundi. The tea plantations are amazing. They're super bright green. Like you
Yeah.
almost think you've done some Photoshop in your green and it's completely natural. Each countries that I've been to, and East Timor, of course, which had beautiful like mountains and coastlines. So I think over the 10 years, because I flew quite a fair bit and I had that aerial perspective, it becomes a bit of a bug as I talk about the travel bug, but it's a
Yeah.
little bit like that with the aerial perspective because I find that it's like you're scanning, you do a bit of an X-ray of the land. You're scanning because sometimes you see those ancient riverbed,
Yeah.
the patterns that are on the ground, and it gets you thinking and dreaming a little bit about the history of humankind. But you see it from above. There's something so yeah, so deep and grand, I find when you fly from above and see the Earth. It's such a unique and different perspective. I loved it so much when I did the work with the UN. And I think when I first came with my husband in landing straight from South Sudan, actually.
Right.
And the first thing that I did, David had gone, he's also a photographer, my husband. And so he went to work in Sydney. So practically abandoned me as soon as we arrived in Margs. It was winter. I knew no one, absolutely no one. I knew hardly anything about Margaret River. And I said, I better accept because I'm a project person. I can't
Yeah.
do nothing. And there was a pilot. He had a helicopter in a paddock in Margs, actually. I kept
Okay.
driving past his helicopter and I thought, oh, I'm going to call him and see if I can just fly above. It was literally straight after the UN. I already missed it because the problem with the UN is that I loved my work, right? But
Sure.
it was at a time of my life where I thought I probably need a break. But I thought I missed that traveling from above. So I booked him and I thought, let's see what the place I chose to live, what does it look like from above? And I obviously was really mesmerized by the entire coastline of Margaret River region. And I started taking obviously some photographs and I thought they're pretty cool. Actually, I love them. And then next thing I saw a gallery in town that had just established itself and I showed my pictures. And actually she said, oh, she offered me maybe to do an exhibition together. And then the next thing I thought, oh, maybe I should do a book. Things just happen this way.
Yeah.
And that was really great. So actually, once I had that also purpose, I felt much better being here. But it was great as well for me because, to be honest, Grant, the reason why I left the UN was I was really burnt out, and that's the truth. And
Sure.
I didn't feel like really, I love people, but I was in a space where I doing aerial was probably the best thing because you don't really talk, right? You're
Yeah.
just there focusing on the land, apart from the pilot, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well.
yeah, hopefully, yeah. But and so it was cleansing for me to
Oh,
do this. It was a way for me to, yeah, detach myself from everything that I had witnessed and then seen. And I just took my time to also transition to be in my new place. So I would say almost the aerials were very therapeutic for me.
fantastic.
I know. And that was Margaret River, but eventually I felt because I kept reading about obviously the amazing WA and I thought would be great if I could expand a little bit. So I did some traveling in up north and yeah, chartered either Cessna or whatever was available. And then I just realized, oh wow, this is like really spectacular actually. This
Mm.
is it's true. Western Australia is actually a spectacular place. And I just started building that body of work, going up north, whether in the Pilbara or even up to Derby. The flight was actually was quite funny because so we're talking about hiring and chartering pilot, and so I booked this pilot for quite a while, and I was tossing and turning. And Derby is complicated because some time of the year you don't even have much pilot
Yep.
available. So anyway, I thought the safest for me will during dry season. And from Margs, it's a bit of a trek. You have to go to Perth, you have
Yeah.
to fly, you have to anyway. And I landed, and at night, that pilot calls me and says, I'm so sorry, I can't fly you tomorrow. And I was like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. I was, because I had planned all of these things, but thank God we found the pilot who was available with another company. And thank God he flew me. And when we took off, Grant, I became very emotional all of a sudden. I never had that. I was almost, wouldn't say teary, but almost, it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
was so, it just, I was really invaded by so much emotion flying above the Derby mudflats. I found them incredible, actually. It was one of the most, I would say, one of the flights that I did that really impacted me, actually. So it was in the early years of my photography, which
Yep.
led me to do a second book where I did actually publish my aerial of other places in Western Australia as well. I don't know why I just had the bug.
That's amazing. And you mentioned having a need for projects. Where do you think that comes from, and why do you feel the need to actually have goals in your photography and have projects to work on?
Yeah, really, probably a bit workaholic, that's for sure. I think in the UN, we used to work 6.5 days a week, I would say, sometimes 7 days a week. But the thing is that with photography, because I love it so much, I don't see it really as work. For me, it's
Yeah.
a pleasure to do it. It's not, oh my God. With projects, yeah, it's funny. I can't not have something. It's not possible. Firstly, I think after years of the UN, of being in an organization where you follow a certain path, whether it's a mission mandate or
Yep.
I'm freelance, so I can do what I want. So I, yeah, I just get excited by, in fact, I have to calm my passion because there's so many things that I'm interested in that I have to pick and choose and say, all right, I'm just going to focus in this. So for a few years, I mainly focused on my aerials. So I did the Margaret River book,
Right.
the Western Australia from Above book. And then I suppose after a few years, even though I know we're talking aerial, but I also reconnected with the need of not humanitarian, but being with people. Yeah. And what
Yeah.
really fascinated me the most was the stories with Indigenous people here in Western Australia, and the language and the lost languages. And so my project in 2015 was to do the aerials in the Goldfields, which are actually really sensational, but also connect with the Indigenous elders, the one that I would be willing to maybe share a little bit and reveal a little bit of themselves and the language. And in this case, interconnect the aerial and the portraits as well. So in 2015, that was my first project. So I remember I packed up the car. I said, okay, ciao. I'm off to the Goldfields. I was not sure for how long exactly. But what happened, Grant, it was an 18-month project. It was back and forth. So I would stay
Yeah.
6, yeah, and come home and blah, 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 and then come back again, because it takes a while to do all the aerials, but also to meet the people, gain the trust. It was actually, I didn't know actually where I was heading, obviously, but it did start with the aerial. And Grant, I went to some of the salt lakes, which are really remote, so I chartered a Cessna. And sometimes there's a lot of time, there's not much really. But then all of a sudden you have this thing, you're like, oh my God, it's like a painting. Yeah, I'll share some of those pictures that you can maybe while I speak, maybe show if you want. But I remember this salt lake was white and red, but like a painting. And I
Yeah.
thought, no one is going to believe me. And then there was another one, it was orange and it looks like fire. And so I started thinking, wow, it's just incredible. It's interesting because the first elder I met, and she's of the stolen generation, beautiful lady. I showed her my pictures and she was like, oh, wow, she just loved them because to her it's country also, it's her
Yeah.
in some ways. And that immediately helped as well, having that trust. She could, yeah, it was a beautiful way actually to introduce myself to some of the elders, is to show the country as well. And they absolutely loved it. And the story came together beautifully over the 18 months anyway. But the Goldfields, I suppose because of the manganese and because of the what's the red again, the iron. But interestingly enough, then a few years later, I went back to the same place thinking, oh, let's see. Then it had, of course, it had changed shape. It had the red had vanished to some dark brown. Actually, I was like, oh, why? Of course, I'm an idiot. I thought I would have the same, but you don't, because because it evaporates, because it's changing. So I had different images, but yeah, no, absolutely incredible place. The Goldfields actually are really, it's they're all different, like the Pilbara, the sensational, but I also love the Goldfields for some of the stories and the elders I have met as well, and together with the aerial. So these days, like I'm doing a current project, which I'm finalizing. There's not as much aerials and night photography, but again, it's a blend of that together for me. You know, I haven't done too much of just aerial or just landscape. I like the idea of blending it with stories that people are sharing with me. That's
And I think that's one of the important things, and it gives me the impression, and I want your opinion on it, but it gives me the impression that the journalistic side or the documentary side is vital to the artistic side. I'm interested in how you see that they've informed one another and how they intersect.
You are so true, actually. It's interesting because years ago, I really considered myself more in the photojournalism era. And then it was UN, which is its own sort of documentation of what the peacekeeping is doing. So that's another sort of photography. And then when I came back, everything shifted towards more documentary style. And even this day you could say expanded, you know what they call the expanded documentary, where you blur down. Even I do a bit of video, not pure documentary video, more And so like even now with that current story that I'm doing, which I will present soon in Margaret River, there is a video component as well, which blend video, photography. And I love that, actually. I love that possibility. To come back to the early days, Grant, where you said where you came from with photography. When I was young, I loved the humanitarian side of things, but I also I wanted to express myself, but I'm not a writer. And it took me so many years to realize photography, of course, is my way of communicating to the world, right?
Yeah.
Photography, not, but at the time I couldn't figure out why can't I find, I could see people, they knew, yeah, I'm going, but it took me so many years, actually. I probably am a slow bloomer. And even now I'm finally thinking, oh, I think I understand more or less what took me so many years. But I think life is a journey, and so is photography as well. And so I'm enjoying this slow that I did the UN, then eventually I did those aerial, but then now I'm including people, and even now I don't necessarily just do aerial, I do also landscape. Yeah. And so I'm enjoying that journey. I think it's part of my life, really. So every day when I wake up, I'm so happy. Well, first to wake up, that's lucky. That's already a good start.
Better than the alternative.
Yes. And just to, I suppose I'm really blessed to be able to do that job, even though as being a freelance photographer these days, really difficult financially. Yeah. But these are the prices I pay to also do the thing that I love, because I'm thinking, why should I do things that I don't love? No, I'm going to do the thing that I love, but that also means a few compromise for sure.
In terms of the creative side, where do you think that has informed the journalistic side? Because I know it runs both ways, and I'm just interested because the way a photojournalist would approach photographing people or a landscape or an urban environment or something is subtly different to the way a landscape photographer or an artistic photographer, more tending to be in that genre, would be. So I'm interested how that has changed the way that you photograph people or urban environments and so forth.
I feel my body is like split in half. I've got that kind of photojournalistic. I've got this other. It's funny. It feeds one another in some way. So, for example, years ago, I was very aware. I suppose because my United Nations work was really important to me as well, because I find it also super fascinating. I'm really interested in the world politics. I'm always constantly plugged in French radio, Al Jazeera, but all sorts. I listen to the world news all the time because I feel that need. So years ago, I saw this world map of endangered languages that UNESCO had published, and that's how I got to narrow. So there was that part of me that was, I'm really interested in that. But then, and living also in Margaret River. So we could have lived in Perth, which is also a gorgeous town. Gorgeous. It's a great town. It's easy and everything. But to be honest, Grant, to be living here helps me so much with the creative side of me. So I tune into the creation much more. I think if I was in Perth, I'd be a little bit stuck in traffic jam to go left. Yeah, it would be beautiful, but it would be cafe life. It would be here. 5 minutes away, I'm already at the beach. I'm already on the Cape to Cape in Boranup, 10 minutes away. So I think the access to the nature, I think we did the right thing to live here in Margaret River. That helped really. There's so many creatives and photographers as we live in a region. And so that's really exciting that we have even the Margaret River Open Studio, where you have 150 creatives showing their work. All of this is really inspiring, but the nature around, and I think we don't have traffic lights, we don't have traffic, in fact, or not the way you have. And so I think, to be honest, if you strip all of this waste of time in some ways, though I do long drives to go to the Goldfield, and that helps me think. So when I do a drive, it's meditation, and I'm thinking about project. So because I'm constantly, you're a problem solver, don't you think? You're constantly solving problem. So when I do those long journey, I love it, because I'm like, I'm going to solve this problem during the journey, hoping that when I get there, I will have figured out what I was trying to do. But apart from that, living here, wow, I love it, because it really is inspiring. Those walks in the forest and those And like I said, we don't even have a traffic light yet in Margaret River, which is
Yeah.
great. So that's a blessing. But it's a blend. There's a part of me that wants to have that connection as well with the world. It's really important. And then
Yep.
there's this other part of me that's tuning into my surroundings as well. And there's a response to it. And I think like most photographers, the minute you finish a project, you're probably thinking of another project. And you know how sometimes you're thinking, oh, I'll photograph in a different way next time because I've just thought about an idea. Sometimes I have to write down the ideas.
Yeah.
Was I thinking again? Yeah. It's constantly, my mind is in ebullition. Sometimes my husband says, oh, I can't even follow you, which is funny. So because I've got so many ideas and I have to really, okay, Martin, calm down. That's probably why I do a lot of yoga, to just ground me. I need
Yeah.
that. So yoga is my way of grounding myself. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a question that I often ask photographers on the podcast around how their location and where they've chosen to live has influenced not what they shoot, because clearly it is going to influence what they shoot, but how they shoot. And you actually touched on it a little bit there about saying, okay, I shoot a little bit differently. Have you got an example of something that you've shot differently because of living in Margaret River that you probably wouldn't have thought of, say, when you were in Burundi or East Timor?
Yes, just that latest project, but I think the latest project that I've done with the Wardandi elders, so they're elders, the women here, there's 3 generations I've been collaborating with, because it's about the spirit world, and it's everything actually was quite funny. Everything has been photographed at night. Yeah. And the funny thing is, and really the first few times we met, it was not even planned this way, but the first time we met on a new moon, and none of us realized until we shot at night. It was like, oh, that's the new moon actually. And then the second time we met was again on the new moon. And then the third time I shot, I photographed some landscape here again. And after the third time, I'm like, oh, there's a bit of a pattern here. And so this entire project has been photographed in the end, pretty much new moon, full moon, and odd days around those days. And actually I thought, oh yeah, it was probably meant this way. I don't know why, but it was, so yeah. And I think it was fitting that particular project with the elders here. And I did some long exposures at night and things. I think it fits really well, this project. I've done some beautiful, I think anyway, but like beautiful night sort of photography with long exposure. And that, when I say beautiful, it fits that particular project for the purpose that I wanted, basically. And even I photographed them as well in the dark at night, and they loved the process as well. I was with them in there. I always travel to where they live in the forest, and where they live is fascinating because they have flocks of cockatoos, the black cockatoo, which is the endangered bodine. I think here it's more bodine, Carnaby is more Perth. So I think this is where the bodine, and we had the red tail and the white tail. The white tail is really related to their, not totem, there's another word, sorry, but it's linked to their moieties. And so there was a lot of symbolism for me as well in that. So you see, Grant, I wouldn't have been able to do that somewhere else. It's really that particular place, with them at a particular time. And so that fitted really that project, yeah. But there will be probably another project I'll do somewhere else, and it will be completely different kind of landscape. So when we met and we started talking, I just decided at that point that it made sense for me to photograph at night. So that was this particular genre for that particular story. And I also videoed as well. And the ladies have woven some emu feathers in the piece that I've done, so we'll project onto that as well. So it's very ceremonial and symbolic as well. So yeah, I have enjoyed all the process as well. And it's interesting because sometimes you think about something, but then someone else will suggest something else, and you're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So there's always that, I like that two-way thing. I never want to be stuck in thinking one way. I start with an idea, of course, but I like to be fluid, to expand just in case. And yeah, it's been so last year I was dreaming about, so the first thing I usually do is lie down for a couple of days staring at the ceiling and dreaming about my project. That's how
Okay.
things happen. I just do like that. And then eventually when I start to figure out where I'm heading, I start to put things into place. So it took me almost a year with that project, yeah, including the shooting time and the everything. And when people are available as well and all of these things. Because the minute you work with people, yeah, you have to work with their schedule too. And
Yeah.
women are very busy, absolutely, with family, obligations, work, everything. So I had to navigate that as well. But it's a very fascinating journey for sure.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yes.
In terms of how you express some of the cultural and social perspectives that you're seeing, where do you draw the line ethically about digging into someone's life versus just showing what you're seeing? And are you trying to express their perspective or yours?
So you're talking about working with any kind of people or
Yeah,
particularly
no, it doesn't matter
or
whether
any
it's
kind of people?
Indigenous or
I think it
otherwise.
depends very much. Definitely with ladies that I work with, I read a lot of material as much as I can on whatever,
Yeah, sure.
including in this case, because the Wardandi, where there's a lot of material in some French museums. So I've been even contacting French museum to get access to material. So maybe that's my photojournalistic side of things. And my journalistic, I do quite a lot of reading and research and everything. And then eventually I get to a point where I will interview that person. The first thing is that probably I will interview them. So I get and then after that, it's conversational. And then if I decide to write or do something, I will always go back to them and say,
Sure.
this is what I got. What is that reflecting? Because obviously if it doesn't, then, but I've been interviewing. Usually I do like that. I do my research first. There would be an interview part of things and then the shooting process. So usually I don't always pick up the camera immediately.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like that, but not always. Sometimes it takes me a long time before I actually pick up the camera.
Yeah.
And then I get super nervous because I'm like, oh my God, what if there's all of these what if? And it's always like that. The other day, I don't know why, I had to go back and I was super nervous for what I don't know. But I always get that kind of, you want to make sure you honor the people the best way you can.
Yeah.
I never want to not honor a person properly. So I hope it answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
What does success look like for you in your photography?
Success is when everything comes together for me and I can finally, whatever I dreamt in my project, all of these things that I've been trying the problem solving.
When the pre-visualization becomes
when all my then slowly come together beautifully. For me, my personal success would be that to finally arrive to a point where I'm happy and I'm like, in terms of my work. And that's mainly it. I know sometimes people talk about whatever money or other things, but for me, it's more success is, and it's really sitting in a beautiful place personally where you feel that at the moment, not at the moment, sorry, but since quite a few years, I'm sitting in a place that I'm really happy. I feel that I understand myself and I, like you ask at first, why you do the things. And when I start a project, that's my first question. Why do I really want to do that? And once I can answer that, I can move to the how, what, and everything. But the first question is really to be honest with myself. Why is it that I really want? Success for me would be that, to be sitting in a place that you feel really at peace in some ways. And it's a hard way to describe success because there's so many ways you
Yeah,
can.
no, but that's why I asked the question, is because everyone defines it differently, and whether
Yes.
it's financial, whether it's the work itself, or winning competitions or whatever.
Oh, yes. It's nice to do sometimes, but I never get caught up too much with that.
Yeah, no,
Because I think because I know where I am, where I know where I sit, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. If you didn't, but I like what I'm doing, or if I don't like, then I wouldn't. But so I feel it's funny at the moment, I feel I'm sitting in a place where I understand myself better. And I also really enjoy the projects. So that helps me move forward. And I don't like, sometimes I would enter, for example, a few competition just because it's nice and everything. But I actually, at the same time, I don't really need that validation because I know who I am and where I'm going. So if it happens, that's great. But if it doesn't, I'll just keep doing what I love doing because that's what matters to me the most, really.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about balance. How do you balance family, the projects, and I guess running your own photography business and wearing all the hats that you've got to wear? You're the chief executive officer, you're the marketing
Yes.
officer, financial officer, etc. So how do you get balance in your life, and how do you manage that?
The balance, yeah. I'm lucky because my husband understands the profession. He's
Oh,
equally busy. He does a lot of stills for movies, and
okay.
he's a photojournalist at heart, but the bread and butter is very much. So he's away sometimes for 6 weeks at a time. And so he understands if I need to be away. So at least in some ways, I think it's not been like difficult. If I need to go, I go. It's me, I'll miss him, but he also understands. So that's great, like that way. Like we're lucky at the moment. We've been together for 4 weeks in a row at home, and
Wow.
so it's blessed. That's really great. But as soon as I go to France, he'll be on a movie set, and that's good. He'll be busy anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it comes naturally, and whatever we need to do, we do. We're together, but we're also fairly independent. We run
Yeah.
our thing together. So in terms of my daily operations, I do what I need to on social media, like
Sure.
probably most of us. I post and things just to keep a little bit of interest, but I don't get caught up I think, too badly into that as well. I do, yeah, I think it's like running. I need to focus probably more on the commercial side of things sometimes, but because I get too lost with what I love, but then that doesn't necessarily
Yeah. Too
make that
much creative doesn't make the money. Yeah.
that's the thing. So sometimes I'm part of my little voice here say, come on, Martine, you need to. But yeah, hopefully there are months which are difficult and others which are flowing a bit better. So far, I've been managing because obviously when I left the UN and I had this full-time job, going back to freelance was a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it is, yeah. I've been 10 years now. But yeah, I'm trying to find that balance. And if I see that I'm getting too like much in the creative side and not enough, I may quickly paddle a bit stronger and faster in the
Sure.
other
Sure.
way just to balance everything. So
Yeah.
it's okay. Yeah.
What's the most important thing you've learnt from running your own business and being a freelancer?
I think you got to follow your inner voice first.
Okay.
You can listen to others, but
Mm.
I think sometimes it's important. Like you say, I love pre-visualizing things. I've got sometimes ideas, and I really follow a lot my intuition. And so it's important to really follow, I think, your inner voice. But obviously, other voices sometimes bring obviously great things on the table. But
Sure.
I just want to follow my path, really. So I just look back now, I'm thinking, yeah, it is a place of privilege to be able to do your own business like this. And it's not easy, but I will do it as long as I can, basically. That's grand. The world of photography has changed already a lot and keeps changing all the time constantly, and you're not like somebody one day will do a prompt, can I have Martine Perret, whatever, aerial of this blah blah. I know that there's a world out there that's a bit looming above the head, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see where that's heading. But yeah, it's more understanding who you are and following your dreams and what you love if you
Yeah.
can.
I see. What's your favorite location to shoot and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the favorite will be the next one, the new one.
Uh,
But
Is there some
but
place that keeps calling you back though that you've got unfinished business with?
unfinished business. I went one more time, I remember, to the Goldfields, and I went, look, I mean, Derby, I'd love to go back. I'll do in October, hopefully I'll do a whole new series somewhere up north. But look, the thing is that there's so many ways of photography, and you could send 10 photographers you're going to photograph this particular place, and we're all going to come back with something
Oh,
different.
I love if I go on a workshop or whatever, you have 10 photographers all standing within feet of one another and they all come back with something different.
Yes.
That's the beauty of it. It's always somebody has got some different way of looking at the world.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the magic. It's your voice. At the end of the day, it's also you bringing your voice on the table
Absolutely.
in some ways.
Yeah.
So, and then I guess people connect or not with your voice. Some people really connect with certain things we do and some don't, but that's part of the magic of the world as well.
That's
But
right.
location, I think every location to me have their own beauty. It's very hard, Grant, to answer your question, but sometimes it will be Yeah, it's a hard one to. I'd love. So far, I've been mainly in Western Australia. So maybe one day I'd love to explore a little bit, just to check other places, whether it's
Sure.
in South Australia, Queensland, or even Northern Territory. But even within WA, obviously there are still many places to go. So just bit by bit, I'll just tick them off. I don't obviously go there all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's complex. You have to. It's like a full trip actually. So
Yeah.
while I'm on holiday, I'm usually these are my holidays. I plan. Yeah, like I would. If I do Exmouth Golf, then I'll go to Exmouth, yeah,
Yeah.
and I see it's quite funny. Everybody's enjoying whatever, and then not that I'm not enjoying, but I would have gone there for a particular purpose, and yeah, and usually do the job and not stick too long. But yeah, but they're fascinating. Oh, the Exmouth Golf is. I went twice there already. I just find it very fascinating, especially that part which is more the no man's land part. It's really stunning. And also because it's always constantly threatened by development, as usual.
Yep.
For me, it's nice because it's part of a documentation in some ways of the pristine natural world. So again, even though I do that aerial photography, there's always the back of my mind where if I hear that a particular place is threatened by being developed or used for mining or something,
Sure. Sure.
I like the idea of having that on file just in case,
Yeah.
just to know actually this is indeed really pristine and this is the base that feeds the whale and the dugong. And so what are you doing, guys? That's crazy. So there's always like that sometimes at the back of my mind. I keep that in mind. I would read before I fly where I'm going. Is there any environmental issues concerned sometimes, or is there
Mm.
any particular things I should be aware, just to keep that at the back of my mind as well.
Yeah. What's the most memorable experience you've had in photography?
Oh, there are many. That's a hard
But
one.
I only want one.
Oh my God. What? Wow. Mm. I think, to be perfectly honest, probably in the UN, because I went to places that were so remote, so where
Oh,
tourists go, meeting quite, okay, a simple moment because I'm a coffee lover, yeah. So every
yeah.
morning I grind that was actually, I thought it was a beautiful moment. So I was in South Sudan in the north, and
Hmm.
we had flown to that refugee camp, and everybody was having a bit of a meeting, like all the big chiefs and wigs and
Yeah. Yeah.
officials, and I could smell the coffee coming from somewhere. So after I did all the necessary pictures, I stepped out and I see this woman, and she was pounding the coffee, and we couldn't really communicate because she didn't speak English. She spoke some local language. But anyway, I showed her the coffee, and
Yeah.
she did the coffee pretty much from scratch and everything. And she mixed with ginger powder and what did she make? No, I think ginger powder. I was not very awake at that point, but I'm telling you,
That would wake you up.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, they say in French it would wake up a dead, and it was the most beautiful moment, Grant. It was just like part of this delegation stepped out in a refugee camp, and this woman, we couldn't really communicate, but she gave me that beautiful coffee, and I don't know, there was just that, and I thought, wow, I probably drank the best coffee in my entire life
Yeah.
in the refugee camp, like of all places.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was just an incredible moment. It was just that connection with someone, and obviously living in very complicated conditions. And the flight to go actually towards that place was really
Oh,
incredible because this was all above the areas of South Sudan, which is also very remote. So that I don't know, there was a moment, but I could say there are so many incredible moments even here. So
yeah.
not a fair question.
Okay, it's my show, so
I don't care, he says. I love it.
not about being fair.
Yeah, no, exactly. Not about being fair, Grant.
Speaking about not being fair, are there
Uh,
any horror stories that you've had from your photography career?
yes, of course, in the UN, yeah, like some
Yeah.
close calls and things like that. Yeah, for sure. Like in Congo, I was thinking, but I won't go into that. But let's say, no, not horror story, but funny moments where, no, it's more like when I went flying, silly me. So open door, and it was in the North Midlands, so in the wheat belt. And then the lady came and landed, and we chucked the door on the side of the hangar, which by the way was really funny because the ambulance came 10 minutes later and saw this door and didn't see anyone and were really worried what happened there. But anyway, we had gone. And while I was flying, I had just bought this beautiful pair of sunnies. And of course,
Off they go. Yeah.
Off they went. And I could not believe it. And it was really hilarious because when we landed in Three Springs, I rushed to the local ID and I said to the lady, she had already closed, and I banged, and I must have looked pretty desperate because without sunnies, I can't operate here in the
No.
double
Yeah.
sun, yeah. And I said, oh, please, can you open? I need, so I bought this like funny, those glasses with pink arm, like this
Yeah.
kids' glasses, but I didn't care. So after that, somebody wrote in the local newspaper, if any farmer finds this beautiful sun, they flew out of the, probably landed on someone's paddock somewhere. So it became a bit of a joke in the local. Everyone was talking about my son is flying out a Cessna, actually. But horror. Yeah, I'm sure. Sorry, you catch me here in Western Australia. I'm sure I've had a couple of not horror, but like lately, it's interesting this question because lately, with all the news that we have, we sometimes are a bit dire about women
Yeah.
being this and that. So when I woke up one morning, it was 3 a.m., part of my nighttime shoot, and I was going to the river and the beach in Margaret River. But to be honest, all of a sudden I was a little bit frozen by fear. I was like, my mind was started thinking, what if? And so I woke up, my husband was not exactly impressed and said, you're coming with me. So it was 3 a.m. It was a last minute thing. He had no idea, but I dragged him out of bed and I said, please come with me, even sit in the car. I don't care, but I feel you need to be there anyway. So off I did my shoot, but it was only a couple of times lately, probably because of the news. I shouldn't listen to the news really, but I
Yeah.
was having a bit of moment of,
Mm.
yeah, and look, I'm sure it will pass, but yeah, but normally, no, I've done those early morning shoot or late at night, but it's true that the news are changing a little bit and you feel,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, better be a bit mindful. But yeah, no, otherwise probably more in the Congos. That's the really like scary moments. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
sure.
But I'm at the moment in Margaret River, it's more peaceful. Yeah.
So far.
So far, yes. Yeah.
Have you ever hit a creative wall or found a point where you just go, I'm just not feeling it today. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, if it's like a day, like I wouldn't have hit a wall and I really for months on end or weeks on
Yeah,
end,
sure.
not that. But there would be a day where I think the danger of our life as freelancers is that it becomes 7 days a week, really.
Yeah.
In my case, anyway, it's always, even my husband sometimes say, come on, you always think about your product. And
Yep.
he's right, actually. I need to sometimes say, I call it a day. And often it won't necessarily be the weekend, it could be midweek. And I would call a girlfriend and say, let's go for a lunch and do this and do that and visit something. And so I would force myself because otherwise, and because you're right, I would hit a bit of a wall and I think,
Mm.
yeah, I need to take time off. So I do my best to, yeah, to prevent potentially to have this longer stretch of
Sure,
maybe,
sure.
but no, I've got all of these other projects. Remember, I said I'm pushing them away. Yeah, it's more like the time. I wish the days, 2 hours is not enough.
Yeah,
I
I know
feel we
that.
need 48, 48
You
hours.
got to sleep sometimes.
You do. Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
What do you see as photography's place in society?
Um, it's it's so important. I just read the other day actually was quite funny. I was looking at Nadar. So Nadar Gaspard Félix Tournachon, who was the first aerial photographer
Yep.
in Paris in I think 1850 or
Something
something
like
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can only imagine the first time people would have seen those images from above. Like
Yeah.
that's incredible. I often think about the early days photographers. So sure, we had the painters and everything, but the early days photographers, like I forgot his name now, Niepce. It was
Yep.
the same time as the English, I forgot the name of the English equivalent of Niepce, but it was more or less, yeah, the first time these pictures came and I just since these days, there was no looking back. Photography has been part of what we do. And today,
Yeah.
even today, there's billions of images created and photograph created every day, as we know. And we can't even imagine a world without it.
Yeah.
People are looking through their phones, scrolling, swiping, or there's just imagery every day. So it's actually super important. It's part of our everyday narrative, I feel.
Mm.
And it's obviously democratized so much compared to what it was. It has changed and evolved even through when I think about the days, Grant, when I went to East Timor with my scanner, the Nikon Cool Scan, do you remember?
Yeah.
And I was traveling with that and you would scan and you would, yeah. And then thank God after that, in some ways for that particular context, the digital came. So it just keeps evolving. But at the end, the result was we were creating, no matter what, some imagery for people to actually consume every day. It's definitely, yeah. So people can't say. It was quite funny. Do you remember that day when during COVID, people protested about we're not going to show any image today because you don't take us seriously?
Yeah,
And
the black screen.
and there was a black, yeah. And I thought, yeah, I think some people would have realized, oh, what would it be if we had actually nothing? There's no photography, no, it's not possible. And every day, billions of the danger is obviously what scares me the most is that sometimes I see an image which is clearly or doctored so badly, and people say, oh my God, it's amazing. And I think what scares me is that some people, a lot of people today don't distinguish the fake news and the fake imagery. That's for me is a scary bit.
Particularly, I think, in journalistic photography, where you have mock-ups of politicians doing things they do, or
and that's why I think more than ever, credible journalism is so important, more than ever. And so that bit of everyday billions of fake, or that maybe not billions, lots and lots of, and that's what scares me the most probably, because the manipulation of, but otherwise, yeah, we can't actually imagine a world without it, as we saw. I'm so happy in some ways that I chose a profession that I feel has just so much meaning in every way, whether I was in the UN or even today facilitating the sharing of stories through aerial and portrait and landscape. I think, like I said, it took me many years to understand that my way of communicating was actually through the visuals and the photography. And now that I understood that, I was like, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Fantastic. What do you see as the future of photography? Is it going to change and evolve more, or is it going to be more of the same?
It keeps evolving. Actually, something that's funny lately when I've been, say, opening a photo on Photoshop, every week there is something new. Like I did a workshop with some student the other day, and we touched on the AI tools just for fun and just so I could show them and even speak about ethics and responsibilities and but then between each week that we were, there was always something new popping, Grant. And I was like, I don't even know if I can keep up now. It's almost like I have to make sure that I check as often as I can, because by the time I do something, and if I did another workshop, I remember in the wheat belt, and by the time I had checked and then we opened on big screen again, platform had changed and I was looking for something and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, but that has changed. That's how fast it goes. So now it will keep obviously evolving and everything will be, and yeah, it's a good question, Grant, because I'm asking that question all the time. Where are we heading exactly? Because even a few days ago, they were announcing the new Chat GPT with voice. And I was thinking, oh my God, where is this going to? So it is very interesting time, very scary times. I feel there's some really odd things happening at the moment, and I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm not sure I'm quite making sense of it, but I'm trying. I'm really looking at the evolution of everything. I almost feel there's something bigger out there, but I can't. So what does it mean for us? Definitely, it's a huge adaptation, certainly. And what does it mean for me with my work, what I'm doing? I think part of my work still requires me to be there. So that's good. But what is the other part? That's the unknown equation. But as usual, Grant, I think it means constantly evolving. We can't sit on our ass and thinking, oh, sorry, that word, but
one of the things that sort of struck me in some of these conversations is the onus and responsibility on photographers themselves to actually shape that future and inform and advise how lay people approach photography, in particular from a journalistic perspective, because
oh my God,
the challenges of sorting out what's fake, what's real.
That should be sorted already at government level, and things should be
exactly. But I think as photographers, we also have a responsibility to lobby the government and work with people to actually understand some of these things better.
Especially if you're in journalism, I would rather they say AI generated, so like not photo.
It's the dishonest people that are not doing that are the problem, and there's always going to be dishonest people. So how do you deal with that?
Can you deal with that? So it's a great conversations to be had, Grant, and I think it's a super important one because at the moment the world is really moving very fast in a direction that we have to be extremely mindful for that balance. And I think you are so right that we have to drive also that conversations probably further. And there are many groups for that, like institutions with photography that could probably also take the lead on that. And we as photographers could have inputs, but very important conversations, because everything, it can feel a little bit scary. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I know that people don't see that, but as photographers, we can't sit back and do nothing. We're constantly evolving with it as well. And I find it's going so fast.
Yeah, and I think we also have a voice. That black screen that happened in COVID, there's things that can be done, and there's awareness that can be raised.
Absolutely. So hopefully, we'll do that very soon, these conversations. Yeah.
What do you like to do when you're not doing photography?
Being with friends, and I do a lot of yoga as well. So that's my way of grounding myself.
Good.
I actually did a yoga teacher training, but I don't teach, but it was more for myself. So yoga has always been there, even in my UN years, to make sure I was grounding myself and not. So that I do a lot, and a lot of actually walk either in the forest, at the beach, on the Cape to Cape. So in the region,
nice.
I love that. And I love traveling as well whenever I can. But usually I combine with, if I can, photography as well. This time I'm going to France because still a lot of members of my family are in France. So that's great. So these are the kind of things I love doing.
Yeah, nice. What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's given you?
Follow your heart is the best advice, I think.
That's fantastic advice. I love it.
I love follow your heart. But the worst advice, I'm trying to think. I'm sure I can think of something. Yeah, sorry, I've got a blank on that one, but I'm sure sometimes if you work on a project and you're so damn clear about your objectives and someone is trying to tell you something, but that doesn't quite make sense. And then you're trying to explain to them, no, but actually maybe I can't formulate why I have to do like that, but I know I do. And then, because sometimes, like I said, when I construct stories and I go and I put the piece together, sometimes it's hard to explain. So I remember last time I went to my printer, and then he finally saw the exhibition. He said, and then he came to see my exhibition. He said, oh, now I understand, because each time I try to explain, people have an idea, but when they see the things together, oh, that's what you tell. I thought that made sense. But so I suppose, without any specific example, but I'm sure I could find a specific example, is when somebody is trying to steer you away from that, but they don't quite understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
Yeah. Or, oh no, that was funny. Anyway, one morning I was shooting a particular thing at sunrise, not a sunset and sunrise photographer, but there was a particular thing I was doing, and this guy was walking past trying to give me advice on how to shoot. And I thought that was pretty funny. And he says, oh, I think you should move this way. And I look at him, I'm like, no, but I'm fine. And it was quite funny, but he didn't know what I was trying to do. So I was probably going against all the rules. So it probably didn't make sense to him. But I said, no, but it's what you think.
As long as it makes sense to you, that's the main.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm sure I could find other example. Maybe I would send you the list of these are my worst examples. Yeah.
Oh, we should be.
Oh, yes.
It should be finishing up shortly.
Sure.
I've got a couple more questions for you.
All right.
Are there any photographers that I should be talking to?
There's a million, as you know.
I know, and I've got a very long list.
I quickly went through and I saw you have already seen so many people, which is great. So I was going to otherwise obviously suggest people like Christian and Tony, because they're WA.
Sure.
But I was thinking, actually, did you speak to Brad Riemer?
No.
He's very beautiful and poetic, and he's got beautiful landscape that I actually love. And he spent a lot of time also in the wheat belt. He's working his own poetic through his visuals. So I think he's got beautiful photographs. And someone like Brendan Byrne is a friend of ours as well. Do you know Brendan? He's
seen some of his work, yeah.
So he's a pap, and he's done a whole series on infrared places of massacre. Of indigenous people, and even as a pap, he would have, I'm sure, some really interesting stories, I reckon.
Absolutely.
I'm so sorry, because I've got a bit of a blank now that you asked me also the question.
No, that's fine.
So many photographers, but with women as well. I love the work of Tamara Dean. I don't know if you're Tamara.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Tamara, so Narel Osio, of course, as well. There's quite a number of, yeah, now you catch me, sorry, because there's a whole long list of,
That's fine. That's fine.
yeah, okay. But yeah, those people to start with anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. My last question's one of the most
Oh, and
important.
sorry, of
Oh,
course.
sorry.
The number one was my husband, even though I'm not sure in terms of landscape, but anyway, he's the number one, David. Yeah. Yeah.
No worries. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, my final question is one that I've been trying to get to the bottom of since the beginning of the podcast.
Oh, wow.
Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Ooh, I'm not a fanatic.
That's
I'm
okay.
I'm a purist. I love the Roman pizza, the
Yeah,
very
yeah,
one,
yeah. The thin, yeah.
with the tomato and whatever mushroom. Or I'm not a purist because I also like truffle oil on pizza, which
Oh,
probably
yeah.
to the horror of the. Yeah, okay. And why are you trying to get to the bottom of that one?
I don't know. I think it's just a fascinating topic to understand what photographers think about pizza.
So what's the percentage?
I haven't actually calculated. I've done
Uh,
100 episodes and I still haven't actually.
and you still haven't, okay, who likes pineapple on pizza? Oh,
I think it's roughly 50-50, but
oh, that's funny. Okay. Maybe because I've got,
all of
yeah,
the Italians hate it, you know.
yeah, I've got the Italian kind of side coming into me in some ways, but yeah, hopefully I'm not disqualified for the
No,
rest.
no, I'm a
No.
neutral. If it's there, I'll eat it.
Yes,
I don't order it.
I love it. That's a good answer. But yeah, no, so yeah, sorry. That's if you come to mind, I'll do a very simple pizza.
Fantastic. Sounds marvelous. Thanks so much for taking time with me today, Martine.
Thank you,
Been
Grant.
wonderful getting to know you. Where can people find your work?
Or I've got my photo shelter website if they Google my name, and I've got Shopify is more for my aerial, and the photo
Mhm.
shelter includes other work as well. And I suppose Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn,
Yeah,
the
all the
usual,
usual places. Yeah.
yeah, the usual platforms, yeah. No Discord and no Snapchat or TikTok yet, but yeah, maybe I should try to learn a few more. But yeah, it would be great to connect with some of your listeners. And thank you so much, Grant. It's been a delight to chat to you.
Thanks so much, and wonderful getting to know you. Thanks, Martine.
Thank you, Grant. See you.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com along with prints and photography gear. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.